Welcome to the Dispense Magazine podcast with news and information about medical cannabis. We talk about the things you and your doctor might talk about. I'm your host, Sven Hosford. In this episode, it's Cannabis Conversations at Solevo Wellness. This is part one of a discussion on pain management and opiate addiction. And in this episode, we hear from Dr. John Metcalf, a certifying physician and chief medical officer of ReLeaf Specialists. Now let's head over to Solevo Wellness, recorded live on September 24th, 2018.
Welcome, everybody. We are here at another action-packed episode of the Solevo Wellness Cannabis Conversations. I'm your host, Sven Hosford. I want to thank Solevo Wellness for putting on this event and putting out some fine food and beverages for us and being such a great host. I'm with Dispense Magazine, which is a magazine which will be in print starting in January. Right now it's online and it's on podcasts. We've got other podcasts coming. Some are recorded. Our last one here is already up on dispensemagazine.com. And so we're really looking forward to having a regular series here at Solevo Wellness. So the theme here that we do with the podcast, and especially at Solevo Wellness, is that cannabis works best when you use it in conjunction with other holistic modalities, other holistic medicine, functional medicine, integrated medicine. This enhances the effects of cannabis. So we're going to talk tonight about opioid addiction and pain management, but from a couple different perspectives. So what we do is we have a medical doctor, and then we've got an alternative doctor, and then we've got the pharmacist here. Well, I should give a little bit more formal introduction. We have Dr. John Metcalf, who's a functional medicine doctor. We have Daniel Johnson, who's a doctor of medical Qigong, and I learned how to pronounce that tonight. Thank you. And we have Richard Greer, who's the director of pharmacy here at Solevo Wellness. And he'll be here to answer the question, you guys got a medical cannabis for that? So anything you need to know about how to take the theory that we talk about and implement it, that's what he's for. So first, we're going to hear from Patrick Gannon of Solevo Wellness, and we're going to hear a little bit more about what you guys do here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sven. First of all, I'd like to say that we're very excited about these podcasts. We're doing them monthly with Sven and Dispense Magazine. We have a few more coming up. We'll get to that a little bit later. What we do here is not just medical marijuana. We believe that it's more than just that. It's the whole complete wellness aspect of things, and that's why we're bringing these free events all the time. Bringing in physicians, we're bringing in holistic health professionals to bring it all together. Because, like I said, it's not just medical marijuana. It's about other aspects of your health, whether it's diet, exercise, your mental health as well. So. We're just very excited to have these events, give it back to the public, and they're always, like I said, they're always free to the public, whether you're a patient or you're an interested caregiver or anybody in the public has an interest.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. So let's get into our topic. As you can see up here, we've got opioid addiction and chronic pain management, and I want to first start with Dr. John Metcalf. He has practiced internal medicine and then turned to functional medicine to treat his own health conditions. Tonight, we're going to be bringing us a very alarming view of the world of pharmaceutical medicine and show just how the pain management medicine industry has led to the addiction of millions of Americans. So let's give it up for Dr. John Metcalf.
Great. All right. My name is Dr. John Metcalf. I'm a board-certified internist in Pittsburgh. I did my residency at St. Francis that no longer exists, and I got into functional medicine because I believe that there was something more than just giving people medications or a pill for an ill. And so it took me along the road to functional medicine, and I did immunology, neurology for a while, and then I became involved with medical marijuana, especially with autistic kids, and I was really amazed at the different effects it had on people. So I'm really grateful for being here this evening. I appreciate Sven inviting me to come out and talk to you about a very important, passionate subject of mine. So I want to get right into some of the statistics. Now, just kind of an overview, just to see how depth of overdose is that in the CDC said in 2014 there was 28,000 deaths. 2015 there was 33,000. 2016 was 64,000. And in 2017 the projections are 72,000 people died from overdose. Approximately 70% of those overdose were actually opioids. Now, each day 116 people die in America from opiate and heroin addiction. 200 die every day just from drug overdose itself. Between 1999 and 2016, there's been a 400% increase in opiate prescriptions. Each day, there's 9,000 emergency room physician where people go in order to be treated for opiate-related conditions. The CDC also projects that there's approximately a $78.5 billion loss each year as a result of opiate overdose, having to do with loss of productivity, treatment, and plus can you imagine the turmoil on people's families and friends, what actually occurs? There's actually 80% of people that use heroin used opiates, prescription opiates first before they made the transition. 45% of heroin addictions still uses prescription opiates. Now, in Midwestern United States, there was a 70% increase in opiate overdoses between July of 2016 and September of 2017. Now, interesting statistics in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, in 2016, there was 2,235 deaths from overdose. In 2010 until now, there have been overdose deaths have increased in all categories. Heroin overdose deaths have increased from 131 to 926 people. Synthetic opiates like fentanyl, which you might have heard of coming from overseas like in China, they've increased from 98 to 1,309. And prescription opiate overdose have increased from 411 to 729 deaths, and these are per the CDC statistics. There's been 630,000 people that have died from drug overdoses until from 1999 2016. Now, the major part of the opiate use is between the ages of 25 and 54. Pharmaceutical companies have spent over $880 million lobbying and making political donations from 2006 and 2015. In summary, we have 5% of the world's population, but we use 80% of the opioids. That is a staggering amount of opiates. Now, also, too, they did a study that showed that 50% of people who take opiates in the United States greater than 3 months in the first year, that approximately 50% of those people will continue to use opiates for 3 years and longer. That's how addicting it can be to people. In 2015, there was a review in the Annals of Internal Medicine that reviewed 34 studies and showed there was insufficient evidence to support the fact of using opiates for chronic pain. They found no study that evaluated opiates greater than 1 year. And what they found is that there was no mention of any correlations with pain, function, or quality of life, or against any placebos during the course of these review of these studies. What they did find out was a lot of side effects, or sexual dysfunction, overdose, deaths, heart attacks. So it was pretty impressive, the results that they found. Now, this was kind of interesting. This talks about 3 different waves in the United States of how opiates came to be. In the 1990s, there was the prescription opiates, and as you can tell by the graph, you can see how it slowly creeped up over the course of several years. The second wave was in approximately 2010, when heroin became much cheaper to use than prescription medications. And the third one was in 2013, when synthetic opiates like fentanyl, which is 50 to 100 times more potent than opiates that prescribed, this became available, and you can see the sharp rise in the opiate deaths that were created. Next slide. Now, in this one, in 2000, in 17, out of the 72,000 people that died from drug overdoses, 30,000 were attributed to synthetic opiates like fentanyl. It is just staggering, the cost that it creates in our country. Next slide. This is real interesting to me, just to kind of give you some ideas about the pharmaceutical companies. The pharmaceutical companies are politically against legalizing cannabis because they figure they're going to lose $18.1 billion a year because of prescription medications if people switch over to cannabis. Also, Purdue Pharma, these are the ones that came up with OxyContin back in the 1990s. And they knew at that point that it was addicting, but they kept that to themselves. So what happened is they said that in early 2000 is that's when they became familiar with the fact of how addicting this was. In fact, in 2007, the FDA sued them for $600 million that they had to pay a fine because they lied to the investigators or the regulators about that. Now, what's also has occurred is that they've also branched off and they set up a sister company called Rhodes Pharmaceuticals that is the largest distributor of generic opiates in this country. On top of that, they just came out with one of the drug cures. You've probably heard of Suboxone or methadone. They just came out with a new delivery system. It's a wafer that delivers the medicine even faster. Now, what's happened because there's been so much bad press and the state medical boards have been heard from the FDA to make changes about opiates, is now what's happening is physicians are becoming afraid to prescribe opiates because of the potential of being sued. So that kind of leaves a big gap, especially people that are on chronic pain. So what's happened with Purdue Pharma, the three physicians that formulated this, they're now taking their products and they're going overseas. Now they're starting to have the same issues in Europe, Africa, and the Asia, because now they're taking the opiates because over there, the market is wide open. Now, there was another company in Arizona called Insys Therapeutics. They paid $500,000 to get medical marijuana disapproved in the state of Arizona in 2016. Arizona was the only state in 2016 that did not approve cannabis because of the political donations. Their board of directors was sued, but they're still fighting that currently. In fact, they just came out with a new product, a synthetic THC, that they said that has therapeutic benefits, which the FDA obviously is known because they have 3 products right now that have THC in it, like Marinol, and this other one is called Syndrose. That's the new one that they just come out with. So you can see that the pharmaceutical companies, there's so much money to be made with patenting and distributing all these short-acting narcotics, but unfortunately you can see the consequences that it creates in our society. And unfortunately, this has been on physicians now to try to correct this issue, and it's a very difficult situation, especially when you have a patient come up and say, listen, in order for me to feed my family, I got to be able to function, and I need to obviously have something for pain. And so that really has created an issue. Now, the exciting part about all of this is that NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Addiction, before 2005, they were doing studies. They were only funding studies that would show negative effects of medical marijuana because they thought that was their mandate. Now, NIDA has come out and said, you know what? There could be a therapeutic benefit from medical marijuana. I mean, it's not a positive statement, but I thought it was pretty interesting that they've changed mid-course. Now, in 2017, there was a study that was conducted by the FDA. They contracted with a group of scientists, and they reviewed 10,000 studies on cannabis and its relationship to opiates as well as to medical marijuana. And they found strong, conclusive evidence that medical marijuana can be used for chronic pain. And they found other conclusions too, but that was pretty impressive to me. So I have to obviously bow down to the fact is when physicians tell me there's no research, there's no experience, or they don't want to get their patients high, then that really kind of affects me because the lack of research and the lack of knowledge they have really makes it resistant and an uphill battle for us to try to educate the medical community. Now, other entities, I'll give you some further statistics. In 2014, the American Academy of Neurology, they studied oral cannabis extract with people that had neuropathic pain, that had multiple sclerosis, and they gave it a top rating about being able to relieve those symptoms. That's a very impressive medical board. 2016, there was also a survey of 244 Michigan cannabis patients. It was published in the Journal of Pain Society that showed that there was a 64% reduction in opiate use, a 45% increase in quality of life, and there was states that had cannabis had a 17-fold likelihood that patients would quit opiates. So that's pretty impressive. Now, they've also done studies in other countries. They've done them in Italy, they've done them in Israel, and they've done them in Spain that show very impressive. There's some new literature out on cancer, which is fascinating to me, but tonight I'll stick with just the opiate issue. In addition to medical marijuana, there's other components in there. You might have heard of terpenes. Terpenes give it flavor and aroma. They also have a great deal of medicinal value. Some specific terpenes that have been shown to help with the opiate epidemic are linalool, beta-carotene, and beta-myrcene. Those are some terpenes that have been shown in the literature to help support the actual phytocannabinoids like CBD and THC that you probably have already heard of. So that was pretty impressive to me. Other studies have shown things that are real interesting is how does the opiates create the addiction? Well, very simple. What happens is when opiates get into the mind, they start to affect the frontal cortex. This is where you make decisions, this is where you learn, and this is where judgment comes in. So they've actually shown that opiates actually start to destroy certain neurotransmitters called glutamate, and by so doing, they create neural pathways in your brain that makes you addicted over and over and over again. Now, the thing that's interesting about that, and there's actually a Dr. Yasmin Hunt who was on Dr. Gupta, CNN, and she talked about all of these different brain studies that she did. Very impressive work that she showed categorically how this can affect it. Now, there's also something called the endocannabinoid system that I'm not going to talk about this evening, which is a master regulator of how the body works, but it all brings it back into balance. They've also done studies to show that CBD, which is one of the components, one of the 5 main components of the phytocannabinoids, can actually start to change the prefrontal cortex, can actually start making those neurons start to regenerate themselves and connect with one another, so people can now start to learn how to get off opiate addictions by touching base with themselves and actually making changes within the brain. So that's really interesting news, exactly how the physiology works. Now, some other studies which I think also help support this. In 2014, the Journal of the American Medical Association, they found that states that legalized medical cannabis, in the first year, there was a 20% reduction in opiate prescriptions. The second year, there was 28%. And after 5 years, there was 33% reduction in opiate deaths. That is unbelievable. Fascinating. And yet the FDA will say there's no, it has no value. It's a Schedule I drug. It does nothing but harm. But yet there's 28,000 studies on cannabis alone in this country, 4,000 on medical marijuana. There's at least 1,000 on pain management and 1,000 on opiate addiction that if you look under PubMed, which is a medical research engine, you'll be able to see these studies because the FDA actually, interesting, between 2000 and 2015, they approved 186 drugs, and out of those 186 drugs, they only required 2 studies to approve them, and actually a third of them, they only needed 1 study. So after 28,000, you kind of wonder, well, gee, why haven't they approved it? Currently, there's 30 states in the United States, including the District of Columbia, that have legalized medical marijuana because 94% of the American public wants to have medical and 64% actually want recreational. So there's a strong movement, and this movement is going across the country. And I personally think within a year that medical marijuana is going to be approved in all states because it's just too much going, there's too many politics involved here. The only thing I think that's keeping it back has to do with the financial component. People say it's a gateway drug. It's not a gateway drug. This is an exit drug. This actually can get you off of those hardcore medications. There. Now, what can be done? Well, the latest legislatures, what they have to do is they say, well, listen, we need more addiction clinics. We need to give more Suboxone. We need to give more methadone. All of these are opiates, too, and they can overdose on these and actually die. Now, yes, they do have a place, but all you're doing is substituting one opiate for another one. Abstinent doesn't work because I talked to you about how the brain changes, the neural pathways, and what people learn. So therefore, abstinent doesn't work. So Suboxone and methadone are pretty much what is available. Now that medical marijuana has been approved in this state and 2 other states as a sole substitute therapy, hopefully all the 8 medical universities that have been approved now in the state of Pennsylvania, hopefully they'll be doing studies in order to give us more information concerning this issue. But basically, this is just going from one place to the other. It's talking about Narcan, which is naloxone. And you might have heard that Dr. Levine talked about people can go down to the pharmacy now and buy some Narcan. So in case you see somebody that has an opiate overdose, you can either give them an intranasal spray or you can give them a shot. But, you know, that's still not really addressing the issue. But this is what the medical society has come up with. You know, we need more and more addiction clinics instead of actually looking at cannabis that has such a wonderful safety profile. And the addiction rate of cannabis is lower than any other drug, including alcohol, smoking. It's only like 9%. But that 9% is also skewed by the fact is that people that get a ticket for recreational medical marijuana, they have to be in a drug rehab program. And those are also included in that 9% that they have posted. Okay, now, this is from one of my teachers. His name is Dr. Dustin Sulak. He's up in Maine. He's the one who taught Sanjay Gupta. And this is a free website called healer.com. If you click on dosage, he actually walks you through the process on how to get started. And if you have opiate issues, he also has a whole big section on this, and this is free to the public. And he also has a lot of educational videos. And truly, this is an amazing man. He really has given back to the community about this. So I recommend this website. I tell every patient that I certify about this because you need to be educated. Because unfortunately, a lot of certifying physicians will say, go to the dispensary, they'll educate you. And yes, they do their best that they can, but there's a lot more to that. And that's why we're all up here trying to educate you, because we have a responsibility to you in order to make your lives healthier and in order for us to do our jobs better. And pretty much. Now, just one last fact. I just read an article this morning at Wake Forest University, at Dr. Koh. They just came out with a new opiate that has been shown to work on different receptors in the brain that actually have no addictive component. It's called AT121. And they actually used it in monkeys, and actually it was 100 times more potent than morphine in reducing pain, but had no addictive properties. This should be interesting to see how this goes down the pipeline. They're going to apply for human trials next. But it's just interesting to see what things are changing, how people are doing research. So anyway, I appreciate this evening, and we'll have questions afterwards. Well, thank you very much for your time.
That concludes part 1 of this Cannabis Conversation on pain management and opioid addiction, live from Solevo Wellness. Tune in again next time for part 2, when we hear from Daniel Johnson on pain management from the Chinese medicine perspective. Thanks for listening. This podcast is a production of Mindful Medicine, LLC.